A very common myth is that when you're given a taste of a wine that you've ordered in a restaurant, you're being asked whether you like it or not. You're actually being asked, is it in okay condition? It smells clean, does it? If it smells mouldy, then it probably is the product of a tainted cork and you're allowed to send it back. But if you don't like it, you're not allowed to send it back. That the more expensive the bottle, the better the wine. There's actually good value at all price points, and bad value too. This one, Chateau La Plège, Bordeaux Supérieur, it retails at about £10 in the UK, so that's certainly not breaking the bank. And this one is well over 4 times the price. It's a classed growth, it's a second growth, a deuxième cru in the 1855 classification. And it would retail at about £45 in the UK. It's Chateau Rosan Gassy from its Amargo, again 2018. And it's actually much simpler and much drier than the cheaper wine. It's got quite a lot of tannin, quite marked acidity, and it's just a sort of embryonic little baby that hasn't really developed to its full potential at all. So if you were to walk into a store and think to yourself, I want to buy a really special bottle for tonight, so I'll spend a bit extra and I'll go for this classed growth, which is bound to be better than the basic Bordeaux Supérieur, you'd be wrong, because so many young red Bordeaux's on sale are nowhere near their potential, and what you're paying for is future development. You're not paying for current pleasure. And you'd be much better off going for the cheaper wine, which will deliver on the night, than this thing, that's something that is just designed to be aged. It's designed to be put in a cellar for 10 years or something like that. So do remember that. It's not always a good idea to go for the most expensive. And even outside the boundaries of Bordeaux, just in general, I've always maintained there is no absolute correlation between price and quality as far as wine is concerned. There are so many other factors that determine a wine's price. There's a huge factor of marketing and segmentation. You know, wine producers, particularly outside Europe, think that they have to have a range of wines. So they have to have an entry-level wine, and then they'll have a medium wine in the same range, and then they've got to have, sometimes they call it an icon wine, where it's got to be more expensive than the rest, which usually means it's chock full of tannin, because it's been put in brand new oak, and it's more concentrated, probably got more alcohol. And again, it probably won't be ready nearly as early as the entry level and the medium wine. And I find constantly in my tasting, I tend to favour the medium one over the icon, because the icon, again, is all about future potential. And it's only if you hold on to it for a long time that you will be able to realise that potential. And sometimes, you know, they're just joking. They're just adding a naught to the price because they think they can. Now, you may wonder why I have this little weighing scale here, and it's because I am increasingly cross about the marketing technique of putting wine into a really heavy bottle to sort of supposedly signify that it's really special wine, which is nonsense and completely unnecessary and extremely bad for the planet. Because when people have audited the entire life cycle and value chain of wine to see where wine's carbon emissions are greatest, it's in the manufacture and transport of bottles. And so if you're choosing a really heavy bottle, you're really adding to those carbon emissions for no reason whatsoever. For instance, this couldn't be a smarter red Bordeaux, and whenever I do my tasting notes now, and if it's at home and I've got a scales to hand, I weigh the full bottle, because it's much easier than waiting to pour the wine out and then weighing the empty bottle. And wine pretty much weighs 750 grams because it's always 75 centilitres. So I weigh the full bottle, and so this one, which is the smartest possible Bordeaux, is weighing 1359 grams, say. But I found this one on my tasting table, which is nothing like as grand. So it's trying to sort of make itself seem grander. And this one is 1580. So that's completely unnecessary to have all that extra weight. It's also got one of these, they call it a punt, the sort of indentation there. And I think, you know, marketing people think it's smart to have a really deep punt. You know, in the old days, you had a punt because you were laying bottles one after the other in a kind of great pile, and you'd put the bottleneck in the punt. But nowadays, that really doesn't matter. So down with heavy bottles, and in fact, I'm campaigning quite strongly against these heavy bottles. I mean, there are various rules that we've all grown up with, like with meat, meaty dishes, you drink red wine; with fish, you drink white wine. But rules are there to be broken, aren't they? And certainly with fish, I wouldn't limit anyone to white wine. I think there are lots of fish dishes that are really good with a fairly light red. Particularly Pinot Noir is lovely with salmon or tuna or something like that, you know, sort of fairly substantial fish. Maybe with the simplest dish of kind of poached white fish, which is rather neutral, it would be a bit weird to have a very tannic young red, because it would kind of overwhelm it. And often it's more a question of matching the weight of the dish to the weight of the wine than a colour coding, really. If you have a very tannic, chewy young red, and you want to make it taste less tannic and young, you want to sort of add years of maturation to it, serve it with a chewy food, which is often meat, but it could be maybe a kind of lentil bake or something like that. And that red would go with that sort of dish. But also you could have a very full-bodied white with a steak, you know, a really big California Chardonnay or a Condrieu from the Northern Rhone made from a really ripe Viognier grapes. So don't be too colour restricted. The only thing I would say about a particular colour of wine is that if in those circumstances that are so common, you are in quite a big party in a restaurant and everybody orders a different dish, then rosé is one of the most versatile wines. A fairly full-bodied dry rosé can go with a very wide range of foods. And incidentally, rosé wines get their colour by being made from red wine grapes that are left in contact with the must, with the sort of embryonic wine, for only a short time, which just tints it rather than deeply colours it, as in red wine making. Then there's a very common belief that it improves wine by pulling the cork before you serve it and leaving it for an hour or so to breathe. That may have been true ages and ages ago when bottling technology wasn't very good, and there was a thing called bottle stink, which kind of hovered around between the top of the wine and the bottom of the cork. Nowadays, bottling technology is pretty much faultless, and that's no longer the case. And it really, I mean, yes, it's quite nice sometimes to aerate a wine before you drink it, but just leaving it with that little area, that little surface area, in contact with air is not going to make much difference at all.